There's been a lot of stories going around lately, and I say lately, that's true. They've been going around for a while about when Social Security will run out of money.
Welcome to the Retire with Peace podcast, the podcast where we help you create a fulfilling and stress-free retirement. Each week, we bring you expert advice, practical tips, and inspiring stories to help you plan and live your best retirement life. Whether you're nearing retirement or already enjoying your golden years, this podcast is here to support you every step of the way. Let's embark on this journey together and discover how to retire with peace.
Really, when you see these stories, they are actually more focused on when will we no longer be taking in enough tax revenue from Social Security taxes. So there is a balance of Social Security money. And at some point, you're not taking enough in versus what you're paying out, and you start to deplete that balance. So at that point, it's not running out of money yet, but it's gotten to the point where it's flipped and you're no longer bringing in enough to pay for what you're paying out. And you're starting to eat into the balance of the Social Security account. Now, we can debate all day whether or not there's actually a pot of money sitting in the Social Security account or whether it's just a balance on a computer screen, but that's for a different day. Point being, we are approaching, by most estimates, a few years from now, the point where that will flip. And we're no longer taking in enough money to cover what we are paying out, and we're starting to deplete the Social Security balance. So that is absolutely a valid concern. One of the keys, though, to consider is this isn't the first time that we've had to address this. And if you're in the process of retirement planning, that means you were alive for the first time, or for the most recent time, where this was addressed and major changes were made. In the early 1980s, there were a lot of changes to Social Security in terms of the taxation and also the timing of benefits. They moved up the retirement age, but they phased it in over a really long period of time. And we are just now ending that phase-in period. So there's different ways to address this to get Social Security back to a point where the projections can be updated and you're no longer going to be bleeding money out of that system year after year based on how much is coming in versus how much is going out. So there's really three different levers that you can pull to fix Social Security. And the reason I'm going through this, I'll cover why in a second, but there's really three different levers. You can either change the retirement age, which they've done in the past, the retirement age being the full retirement age. They moved it from 65 up to 67. So you can move that back for future generations. They typically don't change that for people who are retired or soon to be retired. It's something that would change over the long term like they did last time around, most likely, but it would help with the projected spending over that long term. So you can change the retirement age. You could decrease benefit payments. That's always an option, not a fun one, not something that's likely to be the decision, but you could reduce the payout of Social Security. And the third lever is you could increase taxes. That's always a possibility. And again, keep in mind that the Social Security taxes are paid through payroll taxes. Therefore, you could do a couple of different things. You could raise the tax rate on that. You could also bump up or eliminate the cap on income, because right now, once you hit an income cap, you're no longer taxed on earnings above that amount. So they could shift that or eliminate it entirely. There's lots of different levers that they can pull to make Social Security fixed, essentially, at least for the short term, to make it to where they're not bleeding cash out of that balance, and they're at least have that balance steady based on the tax coming in versus the payments going out. So I say all this to validate that these stories are legitimate, but also to try to get people to understand that there are ways to solve this so that people don't have to worry quite so much about, oh my gosh, is Social Security going to be around 10 years from now? I was counting on this. Who knows what Congress will do? Who knows what the world will be like in a few years? Who knows what it'll be like 10 years, 20 years from now? We don't know those things. But we do have some history of the government taking steps over that long-term period to get Social Security to where it is funded and it keeps going as planned. So when we look at retirement planning, there's different ways to address this. You could certainly plan for a reduced amount if you want to be conservative and say, hey, this is what they're saying. I'm going to take some percentage lower than that in my plan and just have that as my expectation. That could be fine. One thing we see quite often is people, they don't wait to take it. They just take it at age 62. And I'm here to tell you that's not necessarily wrong. It can be a very valid strategy. What I don't want people to fall into, and I say this about any Social Security strategy, I don't want people to fall into the thinking that only one way is the right way to handle Social Security, because that is not the case at all, especially when husband and wife have different incomes and different situations, maybe even different ages. There's lots of factors that go into this. But I mentioned that some people like to take it right away at 62, and that can absolutely be valid. One of the keys with Social Security planning is you don't know what the proper answer is till you're dead. You just don't. You don't know when your days are numbered here. That's probably the biggest input in terms of what's the right strategy for claiming Social Security to try to maximize it. And we don't know what that is. No, there's no way to know. So some people will just say, give it to me at 62. I'm taking it. Fine. And I'm here to tell you that's not necessarily the wrong answer. I'm not saying it's always the right answer, for sure. In fact, a lot of benefit can be had by waiting and taking the higher benefit. And there's all sorts of different tax planning that goes into that. But consider this, especially if you have any major health issues, or if your family does not have good longevity history, taking it at 62 can be absolutely valid. And that can be a way to offset part of the concern about Social Security running out in the future. So there's different ways, if you're concerned about Social Security, to address it from a planning perspective. You can plan for getting less out of Social Security. You can start taking it a little bit earlier. That, I think, depends on the bigger plan. But keep in mind through all of this, based on history, we as a country have been able to fix the funding challenges with Social Security. I know this time's probably a little bit different in terms of how much debt we have overall as a country and everything else going on. I get that, but seniors tend to vote and we should take care of our seniors. So they tend to do that in Congress. So I would be willing to put a decent amount towards a wager to say that they get that fixed in some manner, whichever lever it is they tried to pull or whichever combination they try to go with. They're probably going to get to a point where people are still getting their Social Security funding as expected. But if you're nervous, you can plan for a little bit less, or you can certainly take it a little bit earlier as long as it doesn't completely jack up your plan. Those plans really are specific to your situation when we're talking about when is best to take Social Security. But again, if you're really concerned, and especially if you're not in great health or you don't have longevity, taking it early could be just fine. But overall, Social Security, we'll see how it goes. But historically, they've fixed it. So I don't think it's a gigantic concern from a planning perspective to try to say, oh, well, that's not going to be there at all. It's probably going to be there in some form. How much? Who knows? If you're worried about it, plan for a little bit less. Otherwise, make sure the rest of your tax planning and your investment structure and investment management is in good order, like we talk about on almost all of our other episodes. And you can worry a little bit less about Social Security if you know that everything else is in really good shape.